The Great Hall of Nexus Prime was the largest structure ever built by living hands. It floated in the darkness between 3 star systems and served as the heart of the Galactic Confederation. 12 species had gathered here for 10,000 years to debate and decide the fate of trillions. The walls were made of crystal that sang when light touched them, and the ceiling showed the real stars outside, as if there was no roof at all. Commander Danny Hartwell stood at the center of this ancient hall and felt very small. He was a tall man with gray at his temples and scars on his hands from 20 years of service in the Earth Defense Fleet. He had fought pirates in the asteroid belt and rebels on the moons of Jupiter. He had never lost a battle, but standing here among beings older than human civilization itself, he understood why his species was called the Children of the Galaxy. The Velthari had come without warning. Their bioships had poured out of the dark spaces between stars like a swarm of locusts made of flesh and hatred. In 3 months they had consumed 14 systems. Billions were dead. The great powers of the Confederation had thrown everything they had at the invaders. Plasma cannons that could melt mountains. Singularity bombs that tore holes in the fabric of space. Viruses designed to attack the Velthari biology at the cellular level. Nothing worked. The Velthari adapted to everything. Their organic shields learned to absorb energy weapons within minutes. Their hive mind coordinated millions of ships as if they were one creature. Now the Confederation was desperate, and Danny had come to offer humanity's help. High Chancellor Vorax towered above the assembly. He was Zinthari, and his body was made of living crystal that shifted colors with his mood. Right now, it flickered between purple and deep red. Danny had learned enough about Zinthari body language to know this meant impatience and contempt. The Chancellor's voice rang through the hall like a bell being struck. He announced that the human delegation wished to present their proposed contribution to the war effort. He said the council would hear them, though he could not imagine what the youngest species could offer that the elder races had not already considered. Danny stepped forward and activated the holographic display. The image that appeared above him was simple. 12 long rods of tungsten metal, no fancy technology, no glowing energy cores, just metal shaped into cylinders 20 meters long and 2 meters wide. For a moment the hall was silent. Then the laughter began. The Malorians were insectoid beings with shells of iridescent chitin. They clicked their mandibles together in rapid patterns that Danny's translator rendered as mocking amusement. The Dravosi were creatures of pure light who communicated through pulses and flashes. Their bodies flickered in what could only be described as galactic giggling. Even the Narelians, who had always been kind to humanity, shifted uncomfortably in their water tanks and avoided looking at Danny. High Chancellor Vorax raised one crystalline limb, and the laughter slowly died. He asked Danny to explain what the council was looking at. His tone suggested he already knew and wanted Danny to humiliate himself with the explanation. Danny kept his voice steady. He told them it was called Project Goliath's Fist. The rods would be deployed from orbit and accelerated to approximately 17 kilometers per second. Upon impact with a planetary surface, each rod would release kinetic energy equivalent to a nuclear detonation, but without radiation or exotic particles. The Chancellor's crystal body flashed bright yellow. He said he understood correctly then. He said the humans proposed to win an interstellar war by dropping rocks on their enemies. Danny replied that they were very carefully shaped rocks made of tungsten. This time, even the species that had remained polite joined the laughter. A Dravosi delegate pulsed a message that was translated as asking whether humanity would also bring pointed sticks and fire as backup weapons. Lieutenant Commander Lisa Monroe stood in the observation gallery above the main floor. She was Danny's second in command, and she had warned him this would happen. She had told him the elder races would never take them seriously. She had suggested they simply contribute their ships to the main fleet and follow orders like good junior members of the Confederation. But Danny had insisted. He had said the council needed to see what humanity could offer, even if they rejected it. A Malorian delegate spoke next. She was called First Voice Crix, and her shell was scarred from centuries of warfare. She said she meant no disrespect to the human commander, but the Confederation had moved beyond kinetic weapons before humanity had learned to make fire. She said such primitive methods were ineffective against modern defenses, and asking soldiers to use them would be an insult to their sacrifice. Danny nodded respectfully. He said he understood the concern. He said he only asked that humanity be allowed to deploy their weapons in their own designated sector. He said they would not ask for support from the main fleet or resources from the Confederation. They simply wanted permission to defend their territory in their own way. High Chancellor Vorax considered this for a long moment. His crystal form shifted through several colors before settling on a dull gray that meant dismissive acceptance. He declared that the humans could play with their rocks if they wished. He said the real powers would handle the actual war. He said this session was concluded. As the delegates filed out of the Great Hall, Lisa made her way down to Danny. She asked him why he had not fought harder. She said he had barely defended the proposal at all. Danny watched the elder races depart. Some of them looked back at him with pity. Others did not bother to look at all. He told Lisa that he did not need their approval. He only needed their permission. Now he had it. Lisa asked what he meant. Danny turned away from the emptying hall. He said the Velthari had evolved for millions of years to counter advanced technology. They could adapt to any energy weapon within minutes. Their shields could absorb plasma and redirect singularity bombs. They were the perfect predators for a galaxy obsessed with progress. He paused at the door and looked back at the stars displayed on the ceiling. But nobody adapts to a rock moving at 17 kilometers per second. There is no frequency to match. No energy signature to absorb. Just mass and velocity. The oldest weapons in the universe. The Velthari had prepared for the future. Humanity was going to hit them with the past. Lisa stared at him for a long moment. Then she followed him out of the hall. Behind them, the crystal walls sang softly in the starlight, and the great powers of the galaxy continued to lose their war against an enemy they could not understand. They did not notice the humans leaving. They did not think about them at all. That would prove to be a mistake. 3 months had passed since the council meeting and the war was being lost. Commander Danny Hartwell stood on the bridge of the Earth carrier Resolute Dawn and watched the reports come in. Each one was worse than the last. The Confederation fleet had been pushed back across 4 sectors. The Malorians had lost their oldest colony world. The Dravosi home system was under siege. Even the mighty Zinthari had suffered defeats that would have been unthinkable a year ago. The Velthari were winning, and everyone knew it. Lieutenant Commander Lisa Monroe approached with a datapad. Her face was pale, and her hands were not quite steady. She told Danny that the latest count put civilian casualties at over 2 billion. She said entire species were facing extinction. Danny took the pad and read through the numbers. They were just numbers on a screen, but each one represented a life that had ended in terror and pain. He had seen what the Velthari did to conquered worlds. They did not simply kill. They consumed. They absorbed the biological material of their victims into their hive ships and used it to grow more soldiers for their endless swarm. Science Officer Kevin Park walked over from his station. Kevin was young for his rank, with messy hair and glasses that he constantly pushed up his nose. He was also the most brilliant mind in the Earth Defense Fleet. He had designed the kinetic bombardment system that the Council had laughed at 3 months ago. Kevin said he had something. He brought up a holographic display showing a star system deep in Velthari territory. At its center was a massive planet, shrouded in organic clouds. He said this was Velthus Prime, the homeworld, the heart of the hive mind. Lisa leaned forward. She asked how they had found it. The Velthari had kept the location of their homeworld secret for centuries. Kevin explained that he had been analyzing the communication patterns of Velthari ships. Every biovessel sent regular pulses back to a central point. The signals were encrypted, but the direction was not. He had tracked thousands of these pulses, and they all pointed to the same place. Danny studied the hologram. Velthus Prime was protected by orbital platforms made of living tissue. Millions of defender ships swarmed around it, like antibodies, protecting a vital organ. The planet itself was covered in structures that looked like mountains, but were actually hive spires. Each one housed billions of Velthari drones, connected directly to the collective consciousness. Lisa said it was suicide. She said even if they could get past the defenders, the planet had organic shields that could absorb any weapon the Confederation possessed. She reminded Danny that 3 battle groups had tried to assault Velthari fortress worlds with singularity bombs. All 3 had been destroyed without inflicting meaningful damage. Danny asked Kevin a question. He wanted to know if the organic shields could stop a kinetic impactor. Kevin pushed his glasses up and thought about it. He said the shields were designed to absorb and redirect energy. They worked by detecting incoming power signatures and generating counterfrequencies. But a tungsten rod had no power signature. It was just metal, moving very fast. The shields would see it coming, but they would have nothing to absorb. They would be like trying to stop a bullet by turning off the lights. Lisa looked between them. She said the Council would never authorize an attack on Velthis Prime. She said High Chancellor Vorax had made it clear that humanity's role was to stay in their sector and stay out of the way. Danny was quiet for a long moment. Through the viewport he could see the distant light of human colonies. Earth was out there somewhere. 8 billion people living their lives and trusting that someone would protect them from the horror spreading across the galaxy. He made a decision. Danny ordered all senior staff to the briefing room. When they had assembled, he told them what he was planning. He said the Resolute Dawn and its escort fleet would break formation and set course for Velthis Prime. They would carry out a kinetic bombardment of the enemy homeworld. They would do this without Confederation authorization and against direct orders from High Chancellor Vorax. The room was silent. Chief Engineer Maria Santos spoke first. Maria was a short woman with strong arms and oil stains on her uniform that never quite came out. She had served with Danny for 15 years and had never questioned an order. She asked if he understood what he was asking them to do. Danny said he did. He was asking them to commit mutiny. He was asking them to risk their careers and their lives on a plan that the entire galaxy considered a joke. He was asking them to fly into the heart of enemy territory and drop rocks on a planet. He looked around the room at faces he had known for years. Lisa, who had pulled him out of a burning shuttle on Mars. Kevin, who stayed up for 3 days straight to perfect his targeting algorithms. Maria, who could fix anything with enough time and enough cursing. Communications Officer Greg Walsh, who had a wife and 2 children waiting for him on Earth. Weapons Officer Amy Chen, who had turned down promotions 3 times because she did not want to leave the Resolute Dawn. Danny told them they could refuse. He said anyone who wanted to stay behind could transfer to another ship, and no one would think less of them. He said this was his choice, and he would not force it on anyone. No one moved. Lisa stepped forward. She said it was only mutiny if they lost. She asked when they were leaving. Danny allowed himself a small smile. He ordered Maria to begin charging the kinetic deployment platforms. He ordered Greg to monitor Confederation communications and warn them if pursuit was detected. He ordered Kevin to finalize targeting solutions for Velthis Prime. He ordered the helmsman to set course for the enemy homeworld. The Resolute Dawn turned away from the defensive line and headed into the darkness. Behind them, the Confederation continued to fight a war they were slowly losing. Ahead of them waited an enemy that had never been defeated, and in the cargo bays of the human carrier 12 tungsten rods sat in their deployment cradles. They were not elegant. They were not advanced. They were just metal shaped by human hands for a purpose as old as warfare itself. The galaxy had called them stupid. The galaxy was about to learn otherwise. The Resolute Dawn dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Velthis system, and alarms immediately began to scream. Commander Danny Hartwell gripped the arms of his command chair as the view screen filled with horror. The Velthari home system was not simply defended. It was alive. Thousands of bio-ships swarmed through the darkness like blood cells in a vast cosmic body. Orbital platforms pulsed with bioluminescent light. The planet below was wrapped in clouds of organic matter that shifted and moved with terrible purpose. Lieutenant Commander Lisa Monroe read out the tactical display. She counted over 8,000 enemy vessels in immediate range. More were emerging from docking spires on the orbital platforms every second. She said the Velthari had detected them the moment they arrived. Danny had expected this. He had not expected them to survive long enough to complete the mission. He had simply hoped. Communications Officer Greg Walsh reported incoming transmissions. The Velthari were attempting to communicate. Their hive mind was reaching out with electromagnetic pulses that his equipment struggled to translate. Danny told him to put it through. The voice that filled the bridge was not a voice at all. It was a chorus of millions speaking as one. It was the sound of 1 billion minds united in purpose. It asked the humans why they had come to die. Danny did not answer. He ordered all non-essential power rerouted to engines and kinetic platforms. He ordered weapons to remain offline. He ordered shields to minimum. Lisa stared at him. She asked what he was doing. She said without shields they would be destroyed in minutes. Danny explained. He said, the Velthari organic technology detected threats by sensing power signatures. Their shields and weapons were designed to counter energy. If the human ships powered down everything except propulsion and the kinetic platforms, the Velthari would have difficulty targeting them. They would appear almost dead, almost harmless. Kevin Park confirmed from his station. He said the enemy vessels were circling but not attacking. The hive mind was confused. It had never encountered prey that flew into battle without weapons armed. On the deployment deck, Weapons Officer Amy Chen supervised the final preparations. 12 tungsten rods sat in their magnetic cradles. Each one weighed over 100 tons. Each one was polished to reduce atmospheric friction. Each one carried no explosive payload whatsoever. They were the simplest weapons humanity had ever built and the most terrifying. Amy reported to the bridge that Goliath's fist was ready to deploy. The Velthari hive mind spoke again. It demanded to know what the humans were carrying. It could sense the mass in their cargo bays but could not identify the weapons. It had no records of such primitive technology in its vast memory. It had consumed 1,000 species across 10,000 years and none of them had ever attacked with simple metal. Danny watched the planet growing larger in the viewport. The clouds of organic matter parted as they approached and he could see the surface below. Vast hive spires rose from the ground like mountains made of flesh. Cities of chitin and membrane spread across continents. Billions of Velthari drones moved through streets and tunnels connected by the invisible web of the hive mind. This was the heart of the enemy. This was the brain that controlled the swarm consuming the galaxy. Kevin announced that they were in range. He said targeting solutions were locked for 12 impact points across the planetary surface. He said the rods would hit the major hive spires and command centers. He said the impacts would be devastating. Lisa asked Danny if he was certain. She said once they did this there was no going back. She said they would be killing billions of living creatures. She said the galaxy would never see humanity the same way again. Danny thought about the reports he had read. 2 billion dead. Entire species facing extinction. Worlds consumed and converted into raw material for more Velthari ships. He thought about Earth and the 8 billion people who did not know that an alien swarm was slowly eating its way toward them. He gave the order. The magnetic cradles released. 12 tungsten rods dropped from the Resolute Dawn and began their fall toward Velthis Prime. They accelerated under the pull of gravity and the push of small guidance thrusters. They reached 17 kilometers per second and kept going. The Velthari shields detected the incoming objects. They scanned for energy signatures to absorb. They searched for frequencies to counter. They found nothing. The rods were just metal, cold and dead and moving very fast. The first rod struck the northern hemisphere. The impact was beyond description. 100 tons of tungsten moving at impossible speed converted all of its kinetic energy into destruction. A flash of light brighter than the sun, a shockwave that flattened everything within 100 kilometers, a crater that would be visible from orbit forever. Before the hive mind could process what had happened, the second rod hit, then the third, then all 12 in rapid succession. The great hive spires that had stood for millennia crumbled to dust in seconds. The command centers that coordinated the war effort across 1,000 light-years went dark. The organic infrastructure that sustained billions of Velthari drones tore itself apart as the shockwaves rippled through the planet. And then came the psychic scream. Every telepathic species in the galaxy heard it. 1 billion minds crying out in terror and agony as their world died around them. The hive mind that had conquered countless civilizations was burning. It was fragmenting. It was dying. On the bridge of the Resolute Dawn, the crew stood in silence. The view screen showed Velthis Prime wreathed in fire and smoke. The bioships that had swarmed around them moments ago were now drifting aimlessly as their connection to the hive mind severed. Lisa spoke quietly. She said they had done it. She said the war was over. Danny did not feel victorious. He felt tired. He watched a world burn and knew that he had ordered its death. He had killed billions with metal and gravity. He had won with the stupidest weapons ever forged. Greg reported that the Velthari fleet was in chaos. Ships were attacking each other. Others were fleeing in random directions. Without the hive mind to guide them, they had reverted to primitive instincts. Danny ordered the fleet to withdraw. They had done what they came to do. There was no need to stay and watch. As the resolute Dawn turned away from the burning planet, Danny wondered what the galaxy would think of humanity now. The youngest species. The laughingstock of the Confederation. The children who had just taught the universe to fear falling metal. He suspected they would find out soon enough. The news of Velthus Prime spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. Within hours, every species in the Confederation knew what had happened. The Velthari homeworld was gone. The hive mind was shattered. An enemy that had seemed unstoppable just days ago was now tearing itself apart as billions of disconnected drones reverted to animal instincts and turned on each other. The war was over, but the reaction was not what Commander Danny Hartwell had expected. He stood in the same great hall on Nexus Prime where he had been laughed at 6 months earlier. The crystal walls still sang in the starlight. The 12 species of the Council still occupied their ancient seats. But now, they looked at him with something other than contempt. They looked at him with fear. High Chancellor Vorax presided over the proceedings. His crystalline form flickered with colors Danny had never seen before. Deep blues mixed with harsh whites, and occasional flashes of pure black. Danny did not know what these colors meant, but he suspected they were not friendly. The Chancellor announced that Commander Danny Hartwell, of the Earth Defense Fleet, stood accused of unauthorized military action. He was accused of violating direct orders from Confederation Command. He was accused of conducting an attack that resulted in the deaths of approximately 7 billion Velthari citizens. He was accused of barbarism. Lisa Monroe sat in the gallery above. She had refused to leave Danny's side throughout the journey back to Nexus Prime. She had told him that if they were going to punish him, they would have to punish her too. She had helped plan the attack. She had stood on the bridge when the order was given. Her hands were just as dirty as his. Danny had ordered her to stay silent during the trial. He had told her that one of them needed to survive to continue their work. She had argued, but eventually agreed. The Malorian delegate First Voice Crix rose to speak. Her scarred shell clicked with agitation as she addressed the council. She demanded to know how the humans could have done such a thing. She said kinetic bombardment was a tactic abandoned by civilized species before the Confederation was even formed. She said it was crude and brutal, and beneath any species that claimed to be sentient. Danny asked permission to respond. The Chancellor granted it with a dismissive wave. Danny spoke calmly. He asked First Voice Crix how many of her people had died in the war. He asked if she remembered the reports from the Malorian colony world that the Velthari consumed. He asked if she remembered the images of her people being dissolved alive and incorporated into enemy bioships. Crix fell silent. Her shell stopped clicking. Danny continued. He asked the Council how many sophisticated weapons they had deployed against the Velthari. He asked how many plasma cannons and singularity bombs and engineered viruses had failed to stop the enemy advance. He asked how many worlds had burned, while the elder races debated frequencies and adaptation algorithms. The chamber was quiet. Danny said the Velthari had evolved for millions of years to counter advanced technology. They were perfect predators for a galaxy that worshipped progress. Their shields absorbed energy. Their biology adapted to viruses. Their hive mind turned chaos into coordination. Every weapon the Confederation used against them only made them stronger. But they had never prepared for metal and gravity. They had never imagined that anyone would attack them with something so simple, so ancient, so stupid. Humanity had not won through sophistication. Humanity had won through spite and stubbornness, and a willingness to reach back into the past for weapons that everyone else had forgotten. A Norellian delegate spoke from her water tank. She was called Deep Voice Mira, and her species had always been sympathetic to humanity. She said her world had been 3 days from Velthari invasion when news came that the homeworld had fallen. She said if the humans had not acted, her entire species would be dead or worse. She said she would not condemn the people who had saved her civilization. Murmurs spread through the council. The younger species who had suffered most under Velthari conquest began to speak in support of humanity. The Dravosi delegate who had mocked human weapons 6 months ago now admitted that his homeworld had been saved by those same weapons. High Chancellor Vorax called for order. He said the council would vote on the charges. He reminded them that Commander Hartwell had violated direct orders and acted without authorization. Whatever the outcome of his actions, the principle of Confederation unity had to be preserved. The votes came in one by one. 6 species voted for conviction. 6 voted for acquittal. The council was deadlocked. As senior member High Chancellor Vorax held the deciding vote, the chamber fell silent as everyone waited for his judgment. His crystal form pulsed through a dozen colors in rapid succession. Danny watched and wondered if this was how his career would end. In a hall of singing crystals surrounded by beings who had conquered the stars while humans were still learning to make fire, Vorax finally spoke. His voice was heavy with something that might have been regret or resignation. He said he found Commander Hartwell guilty of being exactly what the galaxy needed. He said the human was too stubborn to know when he was beaten and too primitive to fight fairly. He said these were not crimes. They were virtues. The charges were dismissed. As Danny turned to leave the chamber, Vorax stopped him with a private communication that bypassed the translation systems. The Chancellor's true voice was like wind chimes in a storm. He warned Danny that what humanity had done could not be undone. The galaxy now knew that the simplest weapons could erase worlds. The technology was not complicated. Any species with the ability to reach orbit could build kinetic impactors. The arms race that humanity had started would not end with the Velthari. Danny replied that he understood. He said humanity had not wanted to teach the galaxy this lesson, but they had been left with no choice. When the Confederation refused to take their weapons seriously, they had been forced to demonstrate. Vorax asked if Danny truly believed the demonstration was worth the cost. He asked if humanity was prepared to live in a galaxy where every species feared falling metal. Danny thought about Earth. He thought about the 8 billion people who would never know how close they had come to extinction. He thought about the children who would grow up in a galaxy that feared humanity instead of dismissing them. He told Vorax that he did not know if it was worth it. He only knew that his people were still alive. For now, that had to be enough. He walked out of the Great Hall into a galaxy that would never look at humanity the same way again. 5 years had passed since the fall of Velthis Prime, and the galaxy had changed forever. Admiral Danny Hartwell stood on the observation deck of the dreadnought Falling Star and watched the distant suns burn in the darkness. His hair was fully gray now, and new lines had carved themselves around his eyes. The weight of what he had done pressed on him every day. It was a weight he had learned to carry, but never to forget. The Falling Star was the most powerful vessel ever constructed by human hands. It carried enough kinetic impactors to reduce a dozen worlds to rubble. Its name was not subtle. It was meant to remind everyone who saw it of what humanity was capable of doing. That was the point. Chief Science Advisor Kevin Park entered the observation deck with a datapad in his hands. Kevin had changed too. The messy hair was trimmed short now, and he wore the uniform of a senior officer instead of a rumpled lab coat. But his glasses were the same, and he still pushed them up his nose when he was thinking. Kevin reported that the latest patrol had detected Dravosi weapons platforms under construction above their colony worlds. The platforms were designed for kinetic bombardment. The Dravosi were building their own falling metal. Danny nodded. He had expected this. Every major species in the Confederation was now developing kinetic weapons. The Malorians had begun hollowing out asteroids to use as ammunition. The Zinthari had designed impactors made of their own crystal that could survive atmospheric entry without fragmenting. Even the peaceful Narelians had started stockpiling tungsten rods beneath their ocean cities. Humanity had taught the galaxy to fear the sky. Now, everyone wanted the same power. Captain Lisa Monroe's voice came through the communication system. She was commanding her own vessel now. The destroyer, Silent Thunder, patrolled the border regions alongside the Falling Star. Lisa reported that she was picking up strange signals from the galactic rim. She said they did not match any known species. Danny ordered her to send the data to Kevin for analysis. He told her to maintain position and wait for further instructions. 3 hours later, Kevin had an answer. He called Danny to the tactical center where holographic displays showed the edge of known space. A region that had been empty for as long as the Confederation had existed was now showing signs of activity. Kevin explained that the signals were coming from a species called the Corvani. They had made contact, not with words but with a demonstration. They had launched a kinetic strike against an uninhabited moon in their home system. The impact had been precisely calculated to be visible from Confederation sensors. The Corvani wanted the galaxy to know that they had been watching. They had seen what humanity did to Velthus Prime. They had learned. Their message, when translated, was simple. They wished to negotiate from a position of strength. Danny stared at the hologram for a long time. Somewhere out in the darkness, a species he had never heard of was building weapons based on what humanity had done 5 years ago. They were following the example that Earth had set. They were preparing to make the galaxy fear them too. Chief Engineer Maria Santos found Danny alone in the observation deck later that night. Maria had gray in her hair now too, and her hands were scarred from decades of keeping ships running in the depths of space. She sat down beside him without speaking. After a while, she asked if he regretted what they had done at Velthus Prime. Danny considered the question. He had considered it many times over the years. He told Maria that he regretted that it was necessary. He regretted that the Velthari had forced them into a war of extinction. He regretted that the galaxy had been so arrogant that it had dismissed the only weapon capable of defeating the enemy. But he did not regret that humanity survived. He could not regret that. Maria asked about the Corvani. She asked if he was worried about what they might do with the knowledge humanity had spread. Danny said he was. He said every night he thought about the precedent they had set. Any species with basic space travel could now threaten any world. The technology was not complicated. You just needed metal and speed and the willingness to use them. Humanity had opened a door that could never be closed. Maria said that maybe that was not entirely bad. She said the elder races had grown complacent in their power. They had believed their advanced weapons made them safe. Now everyone knew that the simplest tools could be the most dangerous. Maybe the galaxy would be more careful now. Maybe they would think twice before starting wars. Maybe the fear of falling metal would keep the peace in ways that treaties and councils never could. Or maybe everything would burn. Danny said that was the problem with teaching. You could never control what your students did with the knowledge. Lisa's voice came through the communication system again. She reported that the Corvani ambassadors had arrived at the edge of Confederation space. They were requesting to meet with the humans who had taught the galaxy to fear the sky. Danny straightened his uniform and looked out at the stars one last time. Somewhere among those distant points of light, the Corvani were waiting. Behind him, the Confederation was building weapons based on his designs. Ahead of him lay a future that no one could predict. He told Lisa to show the ambassadors in. He said humanity would meet them. As he walked toward the diplomatic chamber, Danny thought about what they had become. The youngest species in the galaxy. The laughingstock, who had proved everyone wrong. The children who had grown up to become the monsters under every world's bed. Humanity had not asked for this role. They had not wanted to be feared. They had simply wanted to survive. But survival had a cost. The Velthari had learned that cost when their world burned. The Confederation had learned it when they realized that their youngest member had changed the nature of warfare forever. The Corvani were learning it now as they came to treat with the species that had shown them what was possible. Danny entered the diplomatic chamber, where alien forms waited in the cold light of distant stars. He did not know what the future held. He did not know if humanity would be remembered as saviors or destroyers. He only knew that as long as there were stars in the sky and metal in the ground, his species would never be laughed at again. The galaxy had called their weapons stupid. The galaxy was still counting the cost of that mistake. And somewhere in the darkness between worlds, another rod was falling. It would always be falling. That was the lesson humanity had taught. The sky was never safe again.